Hi and welcome to this video where I'm going to try and resolve the two lights that I've got on the dashboard. One is the ABS and the other is the exclamation mark. Now, as far as I know, it's a wheel sensor that's at fault and they're only about £15, so hopefully I'm going to find this sensor and resolve it. Now, I could just plug in my diagnostic computer. That would tell me exactly which sensor's at fault, but I thought sometimes we don't have things like that, but we might have a multimeter. So although it's not quite the right tool to use, I want to see if I can actually find this sensor with just a multimeter and just taking a resistance reading of each sensor. So that's what I'm planning to do in this video, and hopefully I'll find that sensor, I can replace it. It's about £15 and all's good and well. Like I say, it is an MOT failure, so it does need to be resolved. I mean, you can use an oscilloscope, and that's the ideal way, and then you can put that onto the sensor, and I think you might even better spin the wheel and you'll get a waveform of the actual reading from the reluctor ring inside the hub. So, but anyway, that side I definitely haven't got an oscilloscope, so I'm going to try the multimeter. If I get no joy with that, then I'll obviously have to resort to the actual diagnostic tool. So I'll crack on with this. So this is the symptom I've got. I've got the classic two lights on there, one saying ABS and one an exclamation mark. So let's start by getting the wheels off the car. So we will need the little metal hook and the locking wheel nut that's in the boot under the carpets, like so. So using a 17mm socket, we can break all the wheel nuts loose, and this will make taking the wheels off a lot easier once the car's jacked up. So I'm going to do this all round with the intention of lifting the whole car up. Whether I actually achieve that, I'm not sure. But for the video it would make it a lot easier, so I'll give it a shot. So I'm just going to pop axle stands underneath on each side. I'm probably not going to jack the whole car up now, it's looking a bit dangerous, and I'm just going to add the trolley jacks back in place just as a secondary line of safety, and not forgetting to chock the front wheels. So I'll just whiz these rear wheels off like so, and let's have a look at what we've got here. So a little photo here, so we can see the rear strut assembly, the brake disc and the brake caliper, and the anti-roll bar there in yellow, and the anti-roll bar link is in red, and the rear trailing arm in blue. So let's remove the offside rear sensor. And just before we do that, we'll have another little photo just to show the ABS sensor in position. So using a 5mm hex key, we can remove this screw that's securing the sensor in place. Now, I have speeded this up because this sensor took about an hour to remove with liberal amounts of plus gas. So you may want to take your time on this or risk breaking the sensor. So eventually it did come out, and with the magic of video, that's how easy they can come out, but not how easy it did come out. As you can see, it's been well chewed away at by me trying to remove it, but it came out in the end. So we just need to unclip the ABS cable from the various points of the rear axle, and it is clipped in a couple of places on that axle. That's the second point, and there is a little black plastic clip tucked away up here that if you just twist to one side it pops off, and then we've got a cable tie there holding the blue connector in place. So I cut this with a pair of clips. That will obviously need replacing with a new cable tie, and then it's just a simple case of popping the little clip in, and off it comes. So I'm now going to check that with a multimeter. So ideally you'd use an oscilloscope, but since I only have a multimeter, I will measure the resistance of the sensor. So here we go. It's quite awkward to get in there, so you may need some special probes to get down there. And I get a reading of 562,000 ohms. And then when I take a second reading, I get another reading of 746,000 ohms. So I'll keep that as a record. So I'm going to just put the sensor back, as I just want to compare the readings from all four and ensure I can get them out if I need to change them later on. So I'm just going to pop some copper slip anti-seize on here, though the correct stuff is shown below. I did think in hindsight that I probably got a little bit too much on there and thought best probably wipe it off the end of the sensor, because we don't want metal sticking to the grease as the sensor wears. So clean that off a little bit. Okay, so that's simple enough now just to pop back in. I've actually cleaned the hole as well with some sandpaper, because it was still rather stiff to go back in. And then I've put some anti-seize on there on the actual thread as well. And then we need to just pop that back in with our 5mm hex, and then reattach the cable back onto the two metal clamping parts on the rear axle, and just feed that cable back the way it came. I've also got to pop the brake pipe back there because I twisted it down just for the video, and this is torqued to 8 Newton meters. Like so. And then I'm going to just spray the connector a little bit with some contact cleaner, in the hope that if the sensor was faulty, it would now have a good connection. And we do need to re-clip that back with a new cable tie. You can just see the little black clip there in the top of the picture. So that's the rear offside removed, measured and popped back into place. So we're going to then go on to the near side rear wheel, and I'm going to use a wide angle lens for most of this. So again, we just take the wheel off, speed most of this up, and there's our disc. I'll add a photo here so we can actually see the ABS sensor and the 5mm hex bolt or screw that's holding that in place. And obviously you can see the handbrake cable and the hydraulic brake cable as well. So I have somewhat sped this up because it didn't come out this easy at all. I should allow yourself at least half an hour for this. And what I did was use a pair of plumber's water pump pliers, and I used that to wiggle it backwards and forwards before eventually it came out with plenty of penetrating fluid. So here it is after a lot of work. So we'll just remove that now. So you've just got to unclip it again from 2 points on the rear axle subframe. So you can see a little bit more here because I'm using a wide angle lens. So hopefully this gives you a slightly different perspective compared to the other side. Because we should be able to see straight down to where that blue connector is, like so. We'll ignore the rust. It's probably only surface rust anyway. Mind you, the strap holding the fuel tank on looks like it's probably getting towards the end. But anyway, so we'll cut this clip off here, cable tie, and then I can disconnect this sensor. So what I am going to do is blow a bit of compressed air through the sensor hole and onto the toothed reluctor ring that's inside the wheel hub, in the hope that if there's any metal particles that have stuck to the reluctor ring, hopefully this will clear them. And I'll rotate the disc as well while I do this, so that the reluctor ring is rotating, and hopefully it will just give it a bit of a clean off. So hopefully no false signals then. So now to test the resistance of this sensor and see if it's the same as the last one. So I did have some sort of issue here. I wasn't sure if the meter was actually giving me an incorrect reading or not. But when I popped the clips onto here, the test lead clips, I got a very high reading of 5.2 megohms, which I presume is almost like an open circuit. But when I popped the leads back into my other meter, I then got the same reading as I did for the other wheel, which was 573 kilo ohms. So I then did it again, and we got 753 kilo ohms. And yet back on the other meter, I was getting 9 megohms. So I'm not sure what was going on with that one. So I thought we'll leave that meter out of the picture for the moment, because this one's definitely reading the same as the other sensor. So we'll go with that. So I thought I'll just check it again. You can see why you need an oscilloscope really to test these sensors correctly. Taking a resistance reading's not overly accurate. So again, yeah, we've got 753 k ohms. So I'm just going to put this sensor back as well, as it's giving me the same reading. So I'm just going to put a bit of copper slip on here, but listed below there you can see the correct BMW grease or anti-seize paste that you should use. But I've kept it off the tip because obviously we don't want anything sticking to the actual tip of the sensor. So it is only on the body, so that should be okay. So pop that back in, and again we use a 5mm hex socket for that, and we'll then tighten that to 8 Newton meters, like so, holding it quite awkward there just so the camera can see. And then I need to pop the brake pipe back up. So I am going to put a bit of copper slip on the mounting points just to help that cable slip back onto the holder there. And then I need to just pop the brake pipe back up because I've pushed it down for the camera. There we go. So again, the wheel can go back on. Our 17mm socket, and what I'll probably do now is actually drop the car to the ground and torque those rear wheels to 110 Newton meters. So that way I know that the back of the car is actually put on properly. So I don't need to concern myself with the rear of the car anymore. So onto the front offside sensor. So for this I'm going to just put the car up onto low ramps to give me better access for the trolley jacks. So I've put it onto axle stands now, and we'll just take this wheel off and see what we've got here other than rust. Now I have taken the wheel arch liner out, and there's a photo to show the fixings for that. Does make access a bit easier. And with that lining removed, we can clearly see the ABS cable, and it's just hanging there, and it's not even clipped in place. And here's a vertical shot looking straight down onto the sensor and the wiring, and also one very rusty bleed nipple. Might have to change that. So again, you need to be very liberal with some sort of penetrating fluid, and I did use plenty, and also prepping that bleed nipple for being removed. So I did find that I had to dig some of the rust out of the hex head. So what I did was use a slightly smaller hex just to work it around there and try and break some of the surface rust off and clean it out, so I could then use the proper size, which was 5mm, which I then gently tapped into position like so. So that was easy enough to gradually work in and out. So what I did was, as I could feel it undoing, I could feel it was going to start to bind. So then I work it backwards and forwards. Tends to be the safest way of doing things like this, is just to keep working it backwards and forwards until you get a bit more movement each time. Keep spraying some penetrating fluid, and then given some time it soon comes out. Now I wish that had actually happened with the sensor itself. So that was good news, the screw's out. But when I came to the sensor, even though I'd spent a long time on this, unfortunately the lug broke off. So I wasn't going to get that sensor out without damaging it. So considering the sensor may have actually worked, I thought, let's just test the sensor now and see if we get the same reading. Because there's no point pulling it out if it actually may be working. So let's pop our meter on and see what reading we get. So we've got two other readings that we can compare with. So if it's the same as the other two, then presumably this is fine. And it is. We get another reading of 747 k ohms. So I'm going to say that that sensor is probably okay, and I'm going to put the wheel back on. So tighten that all up. A bit disappointing there. I would have liked to have removed the sensor, but hey ho. So tighten the wheels back to 110 Newton meters. And we'll have a look at the other side then and see if we have any more luck on that. So onto the front near side sensor. So here we go. Let's remove the wheel and see what we have here. So at least the ABS wiring is actually clipped in place correctly. And no surprise, we've got the same on this side as on the other side. But again, this hex screw isn't looking any better. So I think these are probably the original sensors. So what I'm going to do first is just test this sensor anyway. Seeing it's the last one and we have three other readings that are all basically the same. If we get the same result from this one, presumably it's okay. I think it'd be very unlikely to have four sensors that were all faulty. So on our probes go, and we get a similar result again. So 754 kilo ohms. So I think that's looking okay. I'm going to still see if I can remove this sensor. So we'll just go through the process. At least I can get the hex screw out. And I did try for the sensor, and it was probably going to break off again. So I thought, let's just put the screw back in and quit before we break the lug off that one as well. So what I did do is again blow compressed air through in the hope of some of that reaching the reluctor ring inside and perhaps cleaning it. And a little bit of Servosol contact spray onto the connector ends, in the hope that if there was a bad connection that it might resolve it. So clip all that back. Everything's looking correct, so we can put the wheel back on. So once this wheel's back on, I'll take the car for a little spin and just see if the ABS light goes out, because it should go out on its own if the sensors are all working. So we'll find out now. So now to the diagnostic laptop, because all four sensors have given us a reading between 746K and 754K, so I'm assuming all four sensors are fine. So I've taken the car for a drive and the ABS lights haven't gone out. So my original idea of trying to find the faulty sensor using a multimeter hasn't really worked. So now I have to resort to the laptop and see what that says. So if we look underneath the driver's footwell, there is the diagnostic socket. So you need to just pop a screwdriver in there and then pop that down. So that's where the connector's going to go. The OBD connector will pop in there. And we'll fire the laptop up now and see if we get any more information on this. So this is a bit frustrating because I was hoping that everything would have been okay since all the sensors seem to be working. So what are we going to get then? Yep. Connect. And let's have a look at these codes. How many codes have we got? Just the one. So not much conclusion there. It's 5DF5 is to do with the ABS control module. Just having a quick look there on the internet, some people have said the circuit boards can get wet or damaged, fry itself. They do say that the sensors can cause the issue, but we have actually resolved the sensor issues. I know previously one of the sensors at the front left was no good, but I've got no error codes at all for sensors. I've only got this one left. So unless the control unit is now faulty and needs to be replaced. And on that disappointing note, here's some reference photographs. So here we have a photo basically showing the exhaust back box, and on the other side of that is the spare wheel undercover. Looking down to the car, we can see the catalytic converter and the fuel tank. And here's the lower control arm, the upper control arm and the rear subframe. And looking on the other side, we can see the coil spring and the rear suspension strut. And here's the rear trailing arm and the coil spring again. This one shows the ABS connector and the little plastic clip which the cable goes into. And this is just the diameter of the ABS sensor of 11.72 millimeters. And the ABS sensor depth is 31.22 millimeters. And its body depth is 25.49 millimeters. And here's the original 3 diagnostic error codes. And here's a couple of outtakes for Boo Boo. So in this video I've got two lights on. I've got the ABS light and the exclamation mark light, and I presume that's to do with one of the wheel sensors. When I bought the car, the lady did mention that one of the wheel sensors was a bit dodgy, so it may need changing. So I'm saying so a lot. So now, when I bought the car, the lights were on, and the lady did say to me it was one of the sensors, and it wouldn't pass an MOT because of it. The sensors are only £15, so maybe there was more to this. Thinking about that, but you've been watching replacing your ABS sensors on a Mini 1R50. Thank you for watching, and I hope this video helps you replace or diagnose your Mini ABS sensors. This video was filmed and edited by me, Mark Savage, in May 2021. I can be found on Instagram and Facebook under Coats and Gators.